What is up, y'all? This is a video that I have been mulling over, posting, doing content about, and I've been really thinking about how I want to position myself on this topic. I've seen a lot of it on social media, and what it has to do with the big, beautiful bill and the classification or leaving out physical therapy from professional status. The first thing that I think we just need to nip in the bud is the government not classifying you as a professional for loan qualifications does not diminish your professionalism, the value that you provide to society, to clients, to the healthcare industry, to your community. And so please, 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 if you are offended by that, you need to look really deep and think about what actually makes you a professional, and it's not somebody else labeling you as that, right? We have way bigger fish to fry if that's what we're going to look at. I do not think that this is an attack on the physical therapy profession. What I do think it is I think it is a reclassification of how funds are allocated. And I actually think it could make a lot of sense to leave PTs out of this classification. Now, don't come at me because I'm going to talk through. I've got some notes here. So if you see me looking down at my notes, it's because I've got a lot to cover on this topic. And it's something that, like I said, I've really been thinking about and really trying to form a well thought opinion. So my goal here is not to make this political. My goal here is to actually talk about the economics, to talk about the consequences, to talk about the potential upside that this could actually have for the PT community, right? So this is just everybody being forced to have a really hard conversation. I think it's important that we look at how we got here, right? The reason why PT tuition rose to the level that it did is because the financial structure allowed it to. So in 2006, I believe it was 2006, basically what happened is the government uncapped student loans. They basically said, look, we're not going to put the same amount of capping on student loans. And so money became more accessible. When money became more accessible, what that actually did to tuitions was inflate prices due to demand rather than economics, right? I also kind of think, again, don't come at me, with where PTs are from a financial earning perspective, we did not see a substantial increase in salaries with the shift from a master's of physical therapy to a doctorate of physical therapy. I kind of think that was a mistake for the profession. Not in the sense of we don't have doctor level education, but we are not earning doctor level money. Like, end of the day, if you are working in a traditional clinic, in a traditional setting, I think you're probably going to top out around $150K. And for, let's say, a medical degree, that's probably like base starting once you're in one of the lower paying out of residency. So again, our ceiling is really other professions' floor, right? So there's a couple of these things that kind of happen. So when more funding came in and demand stayed high, price resistance kind of went away, right? People said, well, look, if I want to be a physical therapist, I have no choice but to take out this amount of money. I have no choice but to, go 200K into debt to get a job making. My first job was 60K. That is not a great ROI, especially if you're in the outpatient ortho realm, right? So when buyers can borrow more money, sellers stop competing on price. That's the way that it works, right? Because now it's like, it doesn't matter. You're not looking, schools aren't saying, well, our school is cheaper. Schools are saying, well, we can just continue to raise prices, raise tuition, And there's no sign of the market actually slowing down because there is enough demand for PTs to enter our cohort. And so therefore prices continue going up, right? So like I said, 2006, Grad Plus loans expand, and this just skyrockets the cost of tuition. So that's why that happens, right? Schools then started to optimize for enrollment, not return on investment. So I think it is St. Augustine. Again, no shade on St. Augustine. They put like 20 cohorts per year through. I don't know if that number's correct, but I know it's a lot. They don't just start people on the beginning of the year. There's multiple cohorts rolling through, right? And so now the other thing that we have happening is we also have this influx of supply. We have so many more physical therapists saturating the market, which then drives salaries down even further. So especially if you're in a school that pumps out a lot of people in that local area, that's why you're seeing jobs that have really low salary rates. It's like there's a surplus of PTs there. There's no reason for them to pay more money, right? So here's some of the things that are happening now. In July, they're saying that this bill is potentially going to pass. It hasn't even passed yet. So again, if you are like freaking out about this and you're saying the government is coming for your professional status, this hasn't even passed yet. This is still proposed. But basically what it does is it puts people into a graduate category and a professional category, where the graduate category has lower caps. You can access less money. And the professional category has higher caps. So this is thing like dentistry, medical, and what's going to stay in graduate is nursing and PT. Well, guys, like again, when we think about this from a nomenclature standpoint, right? If they just called this tier 1 and tier 2, I don't think our profession would be as offended. But because like they're using this word professional, please don't take that as an insult. They've even come out and said like, this is not demeaning. This is not something cultural. This is something legislative. So essentially what that's doing is it's lowering the amount of money that people can borrow. I think it's $100,000, $20,000 per year, $100,000 lifetime, right? This is all from the Department of Education. So this isn't about the professional status. This is about whether or not we are going to have access to unlimited borrowing amounts, which I think is a massive mistake, because I am talking with PTs every single week, and the number one thing that they are stressed about is money. And so guess what is about to happen come July, if it hasn't already happened for you, because the COVID loan relief stuff is phasing out and student loans are starting up again. And so if we really care about the major epidemic here, the student loan epidemic, this could actually be a good thing. In theory. Here's what will actually potentially kind of happen from the economics. Prices won't just fall because borrowing limits have been capped. Prices will fall when demand no longer clears supply. So when demand for people enrolling into PT school starts to drop, that's when supply, the number of spots available, will start to decrease. That's when price competition will come back in to incentivize prospective physical therapists to want to come back to school, to want to rejoin the profession. But seats will stay filled if tuition stays high and enrollment pressure doesn't change. So as long as people continue paying the market rate, and what will happen is they will bridge that gap from let's say it's $200K to go to PT school. $100K will be borrowed from the government, and then you'll have to access another $100K or $40K, whatever it ends up being, privately. Now you may get better rates, but you're going to lose a lot of the flexibility, right? So the way that there becomes real pressure is when there's empty seats in cohorts, when they're struggling to fill the cohort capacity. So here's kind of the three things that I think could generally happen from this. The best case scenario that I think is demand for enrollment softens and schools reduce tuition or restructure programs, figure out ways to make them more cost effective. Maybe it's condensed timelines. Maybe it's fewer fees. Maybe it's cutting some of the faculty, the things that kind of got bloated and inflated, and we really go back to a basics. But what's probably going to happen is people will just keep accessing funds differently, right? So tuition will stay high. Loans will fill the gap. Higher income students, like people who they're in a wealthy family, their parents have money, their family has money, they will start to get those seats and access will start to narrow, not necessarily cost. Now, there's a delayed impact on the workforce here if this worst case scenario happens, which is enrollments drop, the cohorts start to sink, programs either consolidate or close, and then, burnout rates suffer because of that, because now there's not enough PT coming into the market to replace the PTs that are exiting. Now, I know I said that's kind of worst case, but I almost think it's kind of the condition that physical therapy, that the profession needs in order to have this reset. Like, I just don't see any other way that we're going to have a reset, because the other dial that we can turn up is earning potential. So all of this debt to income stuff, all of this professional status stuff, all of this access to borrowing goes away if reimbursement goes up, if PT salaries go up, if you come out of school with the potential to make $250,000, $300,000 in a traditional setting. I'm not talking about starting a business and going online and all those things. That to me, like, that stuff is just a necessity at this point. I just don't see, I could not imagine going back into a clinic, working 40 hours a week right now, and only bringing home like 120 grand. I know that might sound like an ivory tower take, but with what I've learned about how everything works, what I've learned about time freedom and income freedom and building revenue that's not tied to time, I couldn't go back personally, which is why we're helping people exit that system and build businesses in very atypical ways. So again, when we think about like the debt to income ratio, PTs have probably around a 2-to-1 debt to income ratio, sometimes 3-4-to-1. Like, I'll be honest with you guys, I have about $200K in loan debt, and my first job was 60 grand. I think I had about 180 coming out of school. So 3-to-1 loan debt, student loan debt, right? That is going to keep me in a prison, a financial prison, for 25 years or whatever. And that's a totally different conversation. But it is the reality that we're facing for PTs. So this only works. Going into PT school only works if income grows quickly, or you have lifestyle flexibility to lower your income, right? Or lower your expenses. I've worked with people who, for the first 3-4 years of their professional life, they were living at home with their parents still. Call me crazy, but I think if you are a doctorate level profession, you should make enough money to not live with your parents. That's not shading you if you're doing that. That is a reflection of a bigger problem that we have in the physical therapy space. We don't have a passion problem. We have a math problem. We have an earning problem. We have a reimbursement problem. We have a burnout problem. And all of these things are tied in, right? So what is this going to mean for the future of physical therapy? I think that if this passes and if borrowing becomes capped, which again, I kind of think it should. I think people need to make smarter decisions, because I know I wasn't thinking this way when I went into PT school. I was just thinking, I want to be a physical therapist and I don't really care about the financial ramifications. If I'm being 100% honest with you, I think that's how a lot of people are thinking. But I think this is going to start to bring up, and this is why I'm posting this, guys. I'm posting this to start a discussion around it. Because why I think this is really important is if this thing goes through and whether or not whether or not loan amounts are going to be capped, or you're going to have to access private loans because they are capped or uncapped, either way, I think there needs to be a smarter conversation around the earning potential of the profession. That is not to knock the profession. That is not to knock what we do. It is just to highlight the reality that I am seeing daily. So private loans, higher risk, fewer protections. Like a bank isn't going to say, hey, don't worry about paying us. Hey, just pay us as you earn, like the government does with some of the government programs. You're going to lose a ton of that flexibility. And that is going to be a major problem for people. I don't really think that this does anything for current PTs because I think the ramifications of this are years, 5-10 years out if this happens. If we start to see, it's going to be at least 3-4 years, right? Because we have the PTs that are in school. But where I think this will start to affect PTs, current PTs, is if less people are graduating, there's just going to be a higher demand on those people, which again, could be a good thing for existing PTs. Higher demand, higher salaries, right? All this stuff is tied into the economics. So I know I covered a lot, but the reality here is waiting for the profession to catch up financially is just no longer a strategy. I think that the business model that you go into matters. I think that if you're thinking of outpatient orthopedics, you're going to need to consider side business. You're going to need to consider PRN work. Or you're going to potentially need to take a job with higher volume if earning money is important to you, right? If you're somebody who's in a situation where you can settle into an $85,000 a year job and be comfortable and not want to get into that 250-300 range, cool. You don't have to worry about anything. But if you're somebody that wants to make more money, that wants to live a certain lifestyle, you're going to have to reevaluate your setting. You're going to have to maybe go into home health. You're going to have to maybe go into travel. You're going to have to think about starting your own business. And that's just the real consequences of all of this, right? This is the reality. We do not have the same upward trajectory like MDs do, like dentistry does, where you get into specialties and you get into surgery, and you get into solving really specific problems. If you go and get your specialty certification in PT, you pretty much make the same amount of money, which I don't understand why you would do that rather than just become the specialist by experience. Again, I have so many rants that I could go on here. So again, guys, this isn't about scaring you away from PT. This isn't about being negative towards the profession. This is about opening up the door for an honest conversation and making sure that people are aware of what they're stepping into and what happens from that. From somebody who honestly wishes I would have had a little bit more conversation around this. I don't know that it would have changed anything for me. I don't know if you're watching this, if it'll change anything for you. But just that way you can make an informed decision if this is a path you want to go down. So like I said, don't get your undies your panties in a bunch over the professional status. You are a professional as long as you believe you're a professional. You are a professional as long as you do professional things. It does not matter how you are classified in this bill. What really matters is what happens if we get that title or not. And I think that there can be pros to not getting it. So start looking at the actual impact it will have rather than the words are used. And if you have any questions, please let me know. If you want to share this with anybody, greatly appreciated because I feel like this is a message that needs to be shared and needs to be discussed. And let's have a discussion on it. All right, y'all. Have a great rest of your day.